And attention isn't enough anymore, right? Remember the days of eyeballs and stickiness and these kinds of things, and content is king, and how long are people looking at your site, and these kinds of questions. Now, attention just isn't enough, right? Now what you're really seeking, of course, is, and you know this better than I do, of course, is engagement, right? And if you're interested in engagement, you're in for a really uphill battle. How many people have email boxes that look like this? That's mine. I have 11,000 messages in it right now. We're dealing with a time of cognitive overload where our TiVo hard drive is filled up with hours and hours of shows that we're just never going to have time to watch, and yet you feel this kind of weird sense of guilt deleting them before you get to watch them, right? Meanwhile, the amount of data that's stored on our PCs is increasing tremendously. I'm going to read this. I think it's interesting to note. This is a study from 2002, which of course was before the rise of blogs, way before Twitter and Facebook. A study from UC Berkeley School of Information that said the amount of new information stored on paper, film, magnetic, optical media doubled in 3 years. Print, film, magnetic, and optical storage media produced 5 exabytes of new information in 2002. So this is 1 year, and that's the equivalent of 37,000 Libraries of Congress. So we're producing way more than 37,000 Libraries of Congress full of information every year, right? And that's about, hundreds of linear feet of books. And as I said, that study was done long before blogs, long before Twitter, long before Facebook, long before YouTube, right? We're going like this. And how do you deal with that kind of information? And there's going to be more and more streams of it. This is just a quick look at various kinds of sensors that are available for the body alone. So some of you probably use the Nike Plus iPod device that tracks your running and posts it online, right? And there's all these other kinds of sensors that people are developing, sensors that measure your sleep pattern, and glucose sensors for diabetics, and all these kinds of devices that provide even more streams of information that we're going to have to deal with. And our environments are becoming smarter too. This is Smart Dust, a project developed at UC Berkeley. That little thing on the penny is a tiny sensor. It can sense atmospheric pressure and heat and motion. And the idea is that you could stir it up in a bucket of paint and paint it on the walls or paint it on a bridge, and the bridge can suddenly tell you when it's structurally unstable. Or you could sprinkle it on a field, and it can tell you when your plants need, your vineyard, when your your grapes should be harvested. You can put it on objects so that they can tell their own story, right? When the story of the product as it moved through the supply chain. So this changes everything. What we're dealing with is what Kevin Kelly from Wired says is an unrelenting rivers of sensory data that are going to flow in day and night from zillions of sources. And he calls it zillionics, right? How do you deal with all this kind of information? And what we're going to have to do is come up with new kinds of displays, because otherwise, if you think it's bad now, if you think people are walking around like this and getting hit by cars now, just imagine when your plant can talk to you and when your chair can tell you that somebody moved it and your stapler is over across the office. So what kinds of new technologies can we use to digest and consume and participate in this kind of information with these rivers of unrelenting data? So one of the ways is through ambient displays. Ambient displays are technologies that are glanceable. So think about a display where a red light in a way is an ambient display, right? It doesn't say you need to stop your car now until traffic stops on the other side and then you can go again. Instead, it just shows you a red light. You can glance and know what to do. This is a project that was sort of an art project. I like to look at art as a pointer to where things may be headed technologically. From Eric Paulos from Intel Research. It's called Limelight. And it's a little desktop lamp. It's kind of nice. And it's connected to software that he developed that scours the internet for references to terrorism, natural disasters, the CDC site to look at flu and spread of disease and things like that. And it aggregates all this information about really bad stuff. And then it collates that and says, okay, are things bad? Are things not so bad? Are they okay? And if things are glowing blue, things are pretty calm in the world. If things are yellow, you might get a little nervous. And if things are red, you should probably go hide under your desk, right? And so rather than looking at all these news sources, you can just have this desk light and just kind of glance at it every now and then to let you know how calm or how freaked out you should be. Speaking of art projects, this is a piece from Nancy Patterson. It's called Stock Market Skirt. And there's this old saying from Wall Street, you can tell when it came from based on what I'm going to say. And the idea was that hemlines rose on women's skirts in fashion based on the shifts in the stock market. And this is a saying that was going on Wall Street, 50, 60 years ago. And so what Nancy Patterson did is she wired up a mechanism under this skirt on this mannequin, so as the stock market went up or down, the skirt would rise accordingly. And there's other examples of this. There was a sort of similar early version in, I think it was Xerox PARC. There was a fountain, and it would trickle when Xerox's stock price was low, and it would really start to bubble up when the stock was doing well. So it's a glanceable display. We'll also start to need to use our other senses to deal with this kind of information. We only have one pair of eyes, right? So I like to look at maker culture, do-it-yourself culture, which I'll talk about in a little bit, for other signs of how people will use technology in innovative ways. There we go. This is a bacon cooking alarm clock. And what this does, Matty Sallin made this so that when you're sleeping and he puts a piece of bacon on at night and then he sets the clock, and so when he wakes up in the morning, he wakes up to the smell of bacon cooking, right? This fine smell wakes him up instead of like the buzzing of the alarm and that kind of thing. Although he said that the first time he used it when he woke up in the morning, to the smell, he wasn't sure if his grandmother was making him breakfast or his apartment was burning down. But it's an interesting approach to using alternate modes of senses to convey information. Now, one of the things I remember my mom doing is I would lie in bed when I was a kid and she would write things on my back with her fingernail, like spell out words, and I'd have to guess what they are. I'm sure many of you have had that same experience or done it with your kids. This is a project from MIT that takes that same approach to convey information. So it's a vest that you wear with tiny little actuators, little vibrators on the back, and it can spell out words or symbols on your back. So for example, I could be up here wearing this right now and be receiving text messages on my back, right? And again, I'm not saying that everybody's going to walk around with a vest like this, but there are actual interests in it. Of course, the Army's interested in it for battlefield communications, things like that. But it does show you that we have a lot of senses, more than our eyes, that are available to deal with kind of information. This is another project. This is a device for people who are not sighted, who are blind people, and it converts information from a camera that's worn on your glasses into an image that's actually presented to your tongue. So it actually converts the image into forced sensation on your tongue, enabling people who can't see to actually see with their other sense, to convert their sense of taste to a sense of sight. Again, another powerful way to make use of our body's other senses in order to deal with this flood of information that's coming our way. How else will we deal with this? Through life hacks. You're probably familiar with that term. The idea is to come up with systems to be able to hack the way you live, like computer hackers hack code, in order to find tricks and ways to improve your performance, to optimize in various kinds of ways. The term was coined by Danny O'Brien several years ago, who was noticing that his friends who were programmers had also started to program their lives a little bit in order to improve their efficiency, productivity, things like that, as I mentioned. This is a little software app that Danny made, an anti-procrastination alert. So it pops up when he's browsing the web for 10 minutes and basically says, shouldn't you be doing something else? The Army's really interested in these life hack techniques and methods to deal with the cognitive overload. This is a project called AugCog, for Augmented Cognition. And you've probably seen in Top Gun and other movies the fighter pilots, in these jet planes, and they have all these displays, the altimeter, and then all these kinds of, different kinds of images and overlays, and augmented reality and fuel, and they're keeping track of 10 different things. But then when it comes time to engage with in a dogfight, the idea with this is you have EEG sensors that can sense how stressed out you are on your brain, like little things in your helmet. They're not implanted in your head, not yet anyway, but and they sense when you're really stressed out. And so at that time, all of the other information dissolves.